How did you meet Bob Brookmeyer?
Well, I first met him in Binghamton when I was like 13. I mean, he didn't remember, but they were here. The band was here. I have some bootlegs of that band. It was a great band with like the sextet with Joe Lovano, Dick Oates, Jim McNeely. It was a great group. There's a great record called what's the name of that record? Glass. I always forget the name of that record. It's like really beautiful record. Sextet record. I think Tom Harrell's on the record.
Hmm.
But anyway, I've met him. So at that time, then he came to Eastman when I was there. He didn't remember that either. But um, then at that time, I don't know if NEA study grants. I don't think they exist anymore. But at that time, you could get a little NEA study grant. So I applied for an NEA study grant to study with him. Around that time, he was starting a school. No, this is the first thing that happened. He was going to start a school in Holland. He was living in Holland.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the World School of Jazz. It was almost like a Banff type thing where they would have certain people for a few weeks and then other people would come in. It was just going to be this rotating faculty. The faculty looked amazing. So I did apply and I was accepted, and then all the funding for the school just evaporated. And soon after that, he came back to the US because he was living in Holland. And so then I applied for a study grant to study with him. And around that time, he said there was this band. He was kind of getting sick of playing with like old guys who wouldn't listen to him. Those are his words, not mine.
Sure.
And so he had this possibility of starting this band through the Schleswig-Holstein Music Festival in northern Germany, and he could kind of pick the band. It was yeah, it wasn't a professional really band at first. It was just like a workshop summer band basically. And so yeah, he asked me if I wanted to do that, and all the rest of the players were almost all Germans,
Hmm.
and that became the New Art Orchestra
Sure. Mm-hmm.
very pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know in the first year, I'm not sure, but pretty quickly it kind of, we would even like, we were officially the Schleswig-Holstein Jazz Orchestra, and then like we would do that and rehearse and do a gig, and then when the festival was over, we would get on a bus and then just go somewhere else, and we were the New Art Orchestra, like,
Hmm.
so it just happened, which was amazing,
Sure.
to play that music and to get to know Bob. So I had so I studied with him a little bit. I think I took 4 or 5 lessons, but that was a lot for me,
Sure.
and I think I learned just as much just from being in the band. Um, he was so supportive, a real mentor. Really showed his love, and just would he was so nice to me, um,
Hmm.
so encouraging. Yeah,
That's
I miss him
amazing.
a lot.
I feel like it must have been. I mean, you must have been in the deep end there, but to be able to take the lessons with him and get a sense for his approach or some of his compositional techniques, and then be in the band and hear them night after night must have been. I mean, that's a kind of an education. It doesn't come along that often.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but it's funny because the teaching thing that was like a different phase in his life, and he was in a different phase musically. So like, especially at first, we weren't playing any new music, and so there was like virtually no connection between the music you heard, Bob Brookmeyer's music, and then what he was talking about in lessons, which
Hmm.
was like serial music.
Sure.
you know. But we did actually play. What's his? He has this piece called "Serious Music."
Hmm.
I think it's a piano concerto, incredible piece, and the Celebration Suite. So there were little. At first, he didn't even want to play his music that much. We played Jim McNeely's music, and maybe Bill Holman, and some of Brookmeyer's music. He didn't even. But then, as the band became a band, he would find ways to write for the band.
Hmm.
But even then, I would say, yeah, the, 'the I mean, it makes sense in a way. It's like he's not like teaching what he's writing at that moment because he doesn't really know. Maybe it's not codified enough to be able to teach it. So the things that he was teaching was kind of this whole kind of body of teaching philosophies and practices that I think he put together when he came back from California and he started teaching at the BMI workshop and different places like that. And that like he kind of started coming up with things that he could give students that would help them, and that's kind of what he taught. So it wasn't always some of it wasn't like it didn't seem to relate to what he was doing. There was a few things like his white note exercise,
Sure.
which I would say his white note exercise in the period that came to play with him, that little exercise kind of almost became his, guiding force. He used that probably more than anything else because he was kind of not in the, he was kind of out of this, let's call it a serial chromatic phase. That was 10 years before that. So he was really like trying to revolutionize in formally. And so the music, when you first heard it, you'd be like, okay, it sounds like A minor. Like if you were listening to it in a certain way and you hadn't, drank the Kool-Aid on it yet, it would just be like, well, it's just some modal stuff, yeah, whatever. But when you really got into it and you saw what he was trying to do with the forms and all that, you realized that, where he was trying to, like he was picking like a certain place to kind of revolutionize.
Are there things that you think about now that were part of that philosophy or his approach, whether it be, I guess, composition or band leading, that still you think about today and it still is a deep part of the way that you operate?
Well, the cellular thing, like I was saying before,
Mm-hmm.
that's huge.
Sure.
This chorale exercise that he gave me when you were asking me like when I wake up what I would do if I do wake up in a place where I'm going to compose. The first thing I would do was this chorale exercise that he gave me. So that, and I teach that to all my students, and so I find myself invoking the voice of Bob like so much that I might have forgotten where what's me and what's Bob.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I did in the last couple of months actually finally read Dave Ravello's book, and it was just like it was like an audio book. Like I was just hearing Bob's voice. It was just, oh yeah, I remember when Bob's, yep, there, Bob said that. And, a lot of the stuff was very, still right there in my, it's really in there.
Sure.
So for sure I know it's in there when I'm writing, but for sure when I'm teaching, I just, I find myself talking, like when I, I teach a course at McGill, and the first class is my favorite piece, which is KP 94. And so I just have to play that piece first before we do anything else, just so like this is my favorite piece. And then later on we actually look at King Porter, and then we go back and we do kind of look at it again later in the course, because at first everyone's just like, yeah, that's a cool piece, but I don't know what that has to do with like what we're supposed to be doing. But
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's important to let everyone know. I would say he's still hasn't gotten the I don't know, the praise, the rewards. He didn't really get the rewards that he deserved when he was alive.
Sure.
But I mean, if you try to envision big band music today without Bob Brookmeyer, I can't do it.
Sure.
I don't know. I find it's very hard for me to think of anyone who's writing big band music who hasn't been immensely influenced by Bob Brookmeyer.
Sure, that's amazing, isn't it? I've had the opportunity to be in the BMI Composers Workshop for the last 2 years, and that was sort of my reintroduction. I knew Brookmeyer's music well with his, the quintet with Clark Terry and a lot of his music, that kind of his playing as a trombone player, but and incredible, yeah. And I'd heard his music quite a bit, but to go back and dive back into it, and then to the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who've been influenced by him, it's really amazing that the influence that he's had over so many people, and how it still sticks with everybody, and it's reverberates through the whole community.
Totally, totally. Yeah, when I first moved to New York, I was meeting like all these people that had taken the BMI thing with him, and it was, yeah, it was intense. It was intense, the influence that he had, just from that, even just from that one thing. But then if you go to Europe, he did the same thing in Cologne. He did the same thing in Copenhagen. So in Europe, there's also like, tons of musicians that were really influenced by his music, teaching, and I mean, I always still go back to the sound. His sound that he got is unbelievable. And it's like, wow, incredible.